Hello and welcome to Golden Geography. Today we're going to be talking about trade. It's one of the options from the Human Geography paper for the OCR Geography A-level specification. We're going to be looking at key question 2, which is why has trade become increasingly complex? And there's two key parts to this. We're going to focus really on the first part because the second part is a case study. So do make sure you have a look at some of those case study videos too. So 2A, access to markets are influenced by a multitude of interrelated factors. So first of all, we need to think a little bit about international trade. Development, globalization particularly, has changed what happens globally. So the image here shows you the world shrinking, and that's effectively showing you what's happened because of globalization. So no, the Earth is not smaller now than it was 300, 500 years ago. But the amount of time it takes to get from one place to another, because of transport, the development of aeroplanes particularly, but also technology, the internet, enabling that knowledge to get from one place to another instantly, has changed the way that trade happens. And what we find is that as a result of technology and transport communication changes, that actually we don't really rely on domestic developments, domestic economic activity as much. We find that actually the production of one thing, like a car, could be made in multiple different countries. You know, when cars were first developed, they were all made in America. Ford cars were all made in America. All those parts made in America, put together, produced. Now you will find it takes place in multiple different countries. And the same here, this image is showing us oil, its extraction, its refinement, its transportation, its selling. So globalization and the increased connectivity between different countries has meant that we can now split up the manufacturing process and we can do it in different places, wherever it is cheaper or wherever it's best located. That makes trade more complicated because it means that actually we have global supply chains, and those chains, if they get broken because of any kind of political conflict or lack of supply or any disruption, makes it much more difficult. We also have increased challenges because of the role of multinational corporations, big companies like Apple and Microsoft that have invested in economically developing countries because it is cheaper to make those products abroad. So multinational companies now do locate their manufacturing in economically developing countries, sometimes in lower income developing countries as well. And that process of outsourcing has made it a little bit more complicated, has made that international trade much more complex, but also has opened up the marketplace as well to those companies. There are going to be some changes though. A lot of companies do outsource their kind of their customer services and their call centres abroad. That may change. The introduction of AI and having AI as a kind of answer phone, robot answer phone really, is and may lead to changes in things like call centres. It may reduce the need for them. International trade has also been made in some ways easier, but some ways more difficult by trading blocks. We've got an image here of different trading blocks from different parts of the world. The EU is the most traditional one. It was developed to try and help the movement of perishable goods like strawberries and bread from one country to another quite quickly before those goods perished, and that meant the free movement of goods and people, because people drove the trucks and the trains, and that developed those trading blocks to enable trade, easy trade between neighbours. But in doing so, protecting trade between neighbouring countries did mean that often there would be tariffs put on other countries outside of those trading blocks. So great if you're part of the trading bloc, but much more difficult to trade with those trading blocks if you are outside of it. What's really interesting is what's currently happening with America. The US, Mexico and Canada have been part of NAFTA, a trading bloc, But some of the changes, the Trump changes, particularly the tariffs that he's putting on goods coming across the border from both Mexico and Canada, and the repercussions of that could see to some of those benefits being part of a trading bloc disintegrate within NAFTA. We also have some challenges in terms of international trade from changes in the dominance. Historically, northern countries, northern developed countries, so Europe and North America, would dominate trade. But as countries develop in the south and start trading with each other, there's a shift now between south-south trade. Particularly driving that is China and its development of resources and access and trade with parts of sub-Saharan Africa. We also have changes in the service industry. A lot of key services are provided in developed countries, like financial and legal services, but tourism is different. Many people want to go on holiday to places that are different. So, as you can see in this picture, places like Cambodia do rely on tourism, and that's bringing lots of money into their country and changing it quite rapidly. But there are risks. Any kind of disruption, any kind of political disruption or any kind of disease like COVID could disrupt that movement of tourists and that service. But it is changing the way that we trade. And then finally, the increase in labour mobility and what they call the new international division of labour. This is how and where, who does what job. So migration, the movement of migration of people from one place to another for jobs has changed what jobs happen where, and particularly if you are looking at areas where there are the need for particular skill sets, medical skill sets, or technical skill sets, there's a draw of people to those areas with those, but also areas where you have labour, low cost labour, there's a draw of people to those areas. It can create problems, issues, cultural issues or language barriers, but it also can bring greater international diversity and cultural variations. Again, some of the challenges with this may be related to AI and the future of some of the jobs that are associated with labour and the types of jobs that people are doing if they're replaced by AI. Just to really clarify, new international division of labour we can see here, it's the idea that economic geography and your trade are tied together, and different productions of different goods take place in different places, tied into the labour that's needed. But new international division of labour builds on the idea that labour and production are not necessarily tied to one country anymore, but it might happen more on a global scale, global supply chains. There is an independence between countries and their trading. So here we have our case study. We're going to look at the relationship between India and the UK. We're going to be looking at these key points, so make sure you find that video and have a little look at that one. But we're looking at the trade relationship that we have and the impact that these two countries have on each other. So here we have our key points. Pause the video, green you get it, amber you're not sure, red you need to review. So have a little rag of your notes. Thanks for listening.